I started off when I was a young boy, and I would take myself off into the forest or into the hills, and I'd go and camp and head out into the mountains, and I would try and basically leave a tent behind and sleep in the ditches and sleep in rock overhangs and wee caves. What I didn't realise is that those early skills of me making, of course, many mistakes, you know, even foraging, I didn't even know really what plants were edible, what were medicinal, what were practical. I just was using and eating and tasting, which sometimes led to me being sick or, you know, having the shits for several days. But that was just part of my learning curve. And then, of course, this is now later in life. Those early beginnings, those foundations have become what I teach and what I have specialised in, and gaining more and more skills as time goes on, and developing the craft and developing the understanding of things in nature, and then enabling myself to now bring other people under my wing and learn skills that I've been practicing for years. We're going to go for a wee walk, and we'll head along the hillside. We'll also head along the burn out into the moorland here, being amongst the juniper and the more exposed land, and then we'll also head into the forest, and we'll go and look at what the sort of the different variety is in there, and we'll do a few things, and we'll cook up some meat together as well, light a fire in a traditional method. But when we're walking along this area, we're going to be foraging, and sometimes the smallest of plants are the most pungent, and these small little tiny leaves have the most potent smell. Really strong. It's wild mountain thyme. There's even a song about it in Scotland. This is what happens later on in the year. You get these beautiful flowering heads, but early in the spring, it's just literally these tiny little, almost feathery, creeping leaves that come off the stem. What I like to do with it as well is dry it, and then I like to crush it up with salt and make a seasoning that lasts the whole year round. So you can have a thyme and salt seasoning that you can chuck on eggs or chuck on fish. It's a nice way of using the plant. This plant with a nice vibrant purple flowering head, called Rose Bay Willow Herb. If you peel back this hard outside core, this nice sort of light green, almost whitey pith. So if you run your knife along this plant, separate it so you've got two halves, and scoop out the pith, you can actually mash it into your stews. And what you end up with, if you don't have flour to hand, you end up with a thickening agent. You can actually thicken your stews and your soups, and because it doesn't have a strong flavour, it doesn't affect whatever you're making. And then growing in amongst it are some blackcurrants. Nice and ripe just now here. Have a few.
Nice, but
Sour.
got a kick to it.
Aye. So in amongst the red currants here are these little berries, little green berries, and they belong to the juniper. These berries go from green to black, and the black berries become as sweet as a raisin, but they still have that really strong gin flavour, because of course we know juniper is famous for gin. These juniper berries were made into gin, and also would have flavoured some of the whiskies in the past as well. So they have a very strong flavour. They're not like the red currants or the black currants. So underneath the juniper itself, there's an amazing wee habitat, because juniper is a native species. It actually helps shade and shelter lots of different plants. One of them being this one here. This plant here is called wood bitter cress, and it's a cress. It's a member of the cress family. And if you have a wee nibble of that, even that small leaf there, you get a really strong peppery flavour, mustard flavour. Have a try. You're going to get a kick to that. It's nice. So up here, what we're looking for is juniper bark as a tinder for lighting a fire, and there's some just right here. You peel back the bark like so, and you grab it and you crush it between your hands. You create this fibrous mass, and that makes a fantastic tinder. It's really slow burning, and because it's out in the hills, it's almost encouraging you to keep warm at night. It's a sign to keep warm at night. So this plant, I think everyone knows, the stinging nettle. Because it grows out in the open and because it's hardier than the ones in the forests, it's actually got more nutrients in it. It's packed full of more energy, so you're better actually collecting the nettles that grow out in the open than the ones in the forest. And nettle's known for stinging you, which it does do. Some people find that really uncomfortable because the stings are really itchy, and then they look to the docking leaf to try and cure the stings, but I think that's just an old wives' tale. But the actual nettle itself, the stings, I find quite soothing. I quite enjoy them. Maybe it's just a wee strange pleasure of mine, but it's those there, it's these leaves and seed heads that are packed full of nutrients, got loads of iron in them, loads of vitamin C. If it wasn't for the fact that the plant stings you, which again is a survival strategy, it's a defense mechanism, the fact that the plant stings you stops grazing animals such as deer from grazing on the leaves. But because humans are the only mammal to be able to process nettle as an edible, and that makes it a plant that's just for us. My favourite thing to do with it is strip off the leaves like this, chuck it into a pan, mix it with oil and salt, and roast it in the oven, and then you get the equivalent of crispy kale, but you get crispy nettle. As long as you heat it, you get rid of the stings, and therefore it becomes edible, and you're getting so many nutrients. The stem itself, the reason why it's called nettle, is because it used to be used for nets, fishing nets. What you do then is you snap it back. You're looking to then separate the pith. You can spin the fibres like so. Have two tails. What you end up with is the beginning stages of cordage. It's incredibly strong, the fibres. That's why it was used for fishing nets. In order to lay a snare, we're going to have a fixed anchor point, and that could be a tree or a root or a branch that's already fallen, that's heavy, or it could just be a stake, which is what we're doing. We're just going to create a peg that we bash into the ground that holds the snare upright. So as we're walking through the woods, what we're looking for is rabbits will tend to go out of the forest and into more open areas. That could be a field or a moorland or a hillside, and they'll graze out in the hills and they'll graze out in the moorlands, and then they'll run back into the forest if they get scared, or someone comes along or an animal comes along. They'll run back into the woods where they know they have protection and where their burrows tend to be. So what we're looking for, we're trying to find those lines that they're running back in and trying to identify where they're running, and that's going to be where we lay our snare. We can't just lay a snare anywhere randomly in the forest because the likelihood of a rabbit going through it is basically zero. So we need to try and find where the rabbits are running in order to lay the snare properly and guarantee ourselves a feast. So there are many ways to lay a snare or set your snare, but essentially, as long as your snare rope is attached to a nice fixed anchor. So in this case, as I said, it's going to be a stake in the ground, a peg in the ground. And then all this piece of wire does is it just works as an arm to help hold the snare up.
That's like forcing them to go through that route.
Just encouraging it. You don't want to create like a doorway effect where it's essentially there's no other route but that, but just sort of more to encourage it through your line, your snare line, something like that. So it looks easy to run this exact line that the snare's on. It looks a wee bit trickier. That just looks a wee bit awkward to get over. So I'm not going to go anywhere near that. I'm going to run straight through the line and through the snare. Aye, that's the hopefully going to get us a wee bit of supper. So this is a really active hole, and you can see what I mean by the line. So a perfect place to lay your snare here would be on that log, because you know that the rabbits are going over the log in order to get to their hole. So they're already making a movement of jumping up. If you were to lay your snare up here, they'd actually be jumping up into your snare, and this would guarantee you a rabbit. It's not just a case of laying a trap anywhere. You have to understand the way the animals are moving and try and pick up the signs that they're leaving behind, and if you can read the signs, then you can get yourself some food. We're going to create a fire, and once we've created that fire, we're going to then heat rocks in it, in the hole with the fire, and what that's going to do is create an oven, and that oven is how we're going to cook our meat. Something about that size there. What we're on the lookout for is bits of stone, bits of quartz. What the quartz give you is a sharp edge, a stone with a sharp edge, which is what we need for starting our fire. It's a nice big bit of quartz. So believe it or not, this is how we're going to start our fire, using quartz and using a piece of steel. We're going to strike the two together. It's called percussion fire lighting, and we're going to get little sparks from that. And we're going to turn that into a flame using our juniper bark as the tinder. The last thing we need are small branches to get a good strong flame. And the spruce tree, when you snap back these branches, you get these needle thin branches, and they're incredibly good for the beginning stages of starting your fire. So in this bog I have a mushroom. This mushroom likes to grow on the side of trees, especially birch trees, and that can be processed into this, which is called amadou. You can place it on the edge of the quartz like so. When you strike down, you release sparks off of the quartz, and the amadou, the mushroom, will catch these sparks and it will start to glow. I'll place these embers into the juniper bark, that's pretty good. We'll get some stones in, some small stones, and lay them around the fire, let them heat right through, and then we'll be able to, once they're hot, lay the meat and cover it up. Aye. So these are the green stinging nettles. When you're out in the woods, this is the way of doing it: over the fire, crisp them up, and toss them into your sandwich. So we'll take a small handful of these back. This big spruce tree here, I got some incredible uses. Spruce is really, really bitter and astringent if you were to eat the bark. And that is essentially tannin. Tannin is the same thing you'd get in teas or coffees or plants, or I mean loads of things have tannin. Tannin is also something that you can extract out of the bark in liquid form by boiling it, and when you do that you can then make leather. This is a red deer skin and then that's actually a salmon skin panel, so you can make salmon leather, deer leather, rabbit leather, fox leather. You can make leather out of loads of different types of skin, but this deer skin takes about 6 months to tan, so it's a very old method of preserving leather. And then another thing that comes from trees such as birch and pine and etc. is a tar, and it's this black liquid, smells really smoky and fiery, and this black sticky liquid was how our ancestors used to waterproof their leather. You know, it's amazing to think that our ancestors had had the means, just through nature and knowing the environment, knowing the trees, to extract tannin out the tree, preserve a skin to make leather in the most traditional form possible, and then know how to extract an oil out the tree, such as this tar, to put a waterproof layer on their leather to create what would have been the equivalent, you know, back then to like a Gore-Tex jacket. Nowadays you could have a waterproof jacket made out of leather that you could walk into the environment with, into the rain, and be able to have a means of being dry. So toasting the nettles to wilt them just takes away the sting from the nettle, which makes them edible because then it doesn't sting your mouth. That's you turning them into essentially now little nettle crisps. We've got to be kind of quick here, or quickish, because we want to keep as much heat as we can in the rocks. Cover that over with sphagnum moss, and then from that we'll just chuck the soil over the top. There we go. There's our oven. Do a lot of different carving of different woods, but birch is a fantastic wood to carve. And this is an example of a finished bowl carved out of birch wood with a chisel finish. So there's no sandpaper, it's just been finished with a small crook knife to give it that kind of almost carved look about it. Fantastic. Wow. So that's the nettles and the wood bittercress. And then we've got the venison cooked in the rock oven. And then on top of that we've got a wrap with mayonnaise. I don't know if it would pass for a fancy restaurant, but I'd say that's pretty damn good. And the last important thing is a good woodsman. Always tidies up after himself. We try and leave it like nobody's been here.